Okay, looks like now it's back. This is so brutal. Okay. Well, not gonna worry about it. Let us just begin the discussion. Oh yeah, Dick Cheney died. If I had any viewers to tell that to. What up, single viewer? We're doing a politics mega stream today. All right, let's start with something interesting, even though I've already seen it. There's two people watching. Anyway, this is a good video that just kind of describes what the current
Hey guys, welcome
predictions
back
look
to
like.
today's video. Today is Monday, November 3rd, 2025. Happy election forecast. On your screen right now are a lot of races that we are going to be taking a look at today. The New York City mayoral race, California, as well as the New Jersey governor's race here. It is election even. I'm super excited to actually release what we expect expect to see on election night in about 24 hours. I will be doing a live stream. If you're interested in watching, I'd encourage that you do so. We'll be going through the results through the evening as we start to see the results pour in. Probably will end around the time that California's Proposition 50 is wrapped up. Notoriously, though, the state is very slow at capturing vote count. We know that from the Secretary of State, who's been quite resistant to any type of substantive change in the Secretary of State's office. But really what I'm focusing on today is a lot less about, how we expect the results to come in hour after hour, but rather what we can expect to see as the results are confirmed in each of these individual races. So we are going to go in order, as you see on your screen right now. New York City's mayoral race is going to be the one that we talk about first. We're going to go to California's Proposition 50, jump over to Virginia afterwards, and then finish off
Yo, is it now? It's on. That's hilarious. That's this is the epitome of what it means when you have absolutely no viewers. But shout out to you, Carius, because that was definitely silent for a long time. So appreciate that. Try to fix. Now it is my bad. No, no, no. You're good, bro, because it's my bad. I totally did not have the audio on. I'm curious what I even just talked about that. What did I talk about that you guys didn't hear? Probably all of it. Okay, well then in that case, I'm going back to the beginning. And also, you're literally the only person watching this, so I don't feel too bad. about rerunning things. But essentially, I'm doing election predictions for today. I'm sure my audience is extremely interested in election stuff. So, but that is a personal passion of mine, and that I'm gonna talk about today. So anyway, I have this great channel up. They're called Let's Talk Elections. This guy does a really good job of discussing, just current, like, what's going on. Capirius says, yeah, my username changes, freak out, even my closer friends who don't know why I do. With my alts, a little much love. Yeah, it's all good, dude. It seems like just based on your username, you're doing cool stuff. Semen retention, shadow work, exploiter. I don't know what that means, but yeah, obviously you're focused on self-development. So for the most part, you're in the right place. I just happen to have a love for politics, and I'm kind of going to be angling a little bit more in that direction. I think that my perception is that there's like the main thing in your life that controls your reality is your action, right? The way that you think, the way that you act, the way that you instill your version of control on your environment. That will always be the number one thing that affects you as a human. I do think that your politics is the second thing. Nothing will affect your life more than the decisions that politicians make about the world around you. And so I wish more people got involved. I wish more people cared. In the United States, we have like less than 50% of eligible voters participate in any given election, which is insane. So I think that, it's important to talk about, and it's something that I'm going to be doing a lot more in terms of what I'm worried about. So that's what I'm doing. So today is November 4th. Today is an election day. And hey, Colin Fitzgerald was just watching Why Is Weed Quitting So Hard? Hey, there you go. Well, totally non sequitur video, but I appreciate you checking it out, Colin. So anyway, today we have really 4 major elections that are going on. One in Virginia, one in California, one in New York, and one in New Jersey. Now that being said, most of you probably have elections around you. Here where I live in Pennsylvania, we're doing a lot of judicial elections, which is important stuff. The law, the rule of law, right? And so this is, like I said, I know I'm repeating myself a lot. I'm just commenting on stuff that's going on. Carius says, definitely would try to focus on your topics and we'll add relevant commentary on slower occasions. Hey, no worries. I appreciate you being here. All 5 of you guys, 6 of you guys, if you count the single viewer on Twitch, who is probably me, we're gonna have a great time. So my prediction, I'm just gonna start with these are the major ones that Let's Talk Elections is forecasting. There is a major election in Pennsylvania, like I said. There's another one in North Carolina, which he doesn't have, but I guess they're not good for views. So. New York City, it's a blowout. I just spit. New York City's a blowout so far. New York Times NYC mayoral poll. The hot shot choice is Zoran Mamdani right now. This has just been the way it is for months, frankly. At this point, I will point out here that some of these polls are Republican polls, so they kind of boost up Curtis Sliwa a little bit. But as you can see, that even in the average poll here is still over 10 points in the lead, and some of them as high as like 26 points. And Emerson College is a pretty solid source for information. They dropped the ball a little bit on the presidential election of last year, but pretty much everybody did. Kamala was kind of the favorite, and people did not expect that Trump was going to be able to win re-election. I don't think that the Democratic Party establishment did enough both to talk about, but really even acknowledge the state of the economy in this country. It seemed like they were kind of speaking over regular people in terms of the average working person's experience regarding the economy in this country. But that being said, overall, right, it's clear Mamdani has a massive lead. If we head over to Polymarket, the lead that Mamdani has is devastating. It's about a 90-10 breakdown, and I highly encourage people to start using Polymarket because it does a much better job of giving sort of that overall sentiment, right? Polls tend to favor particular groups, particular demographics. They often skip important conversations that are being had in favor of the people that are most accessible to them via their polling. When you go to Polymarket does a much better job of providing overall sentiment, because these people that are voting on this, sure, they're using, of course they're using polls, but more than anything, they're using social media. They're listening to general sentiments of their neighbors, of what they're seeing on the news, of what they're reading on Reddit or Twitter or whatever, seeing on YouTube. And so that is where I have started going here quite a bit, because all of these polls in November were in favor of Kamala Harris. They were pro-Kamala, right? They were like, we're all the way. Kamala Harris is going to win. But Kamala Harris was losing pretty substantially in the poly markets. And so that's one thing that I think that people should kind of be considerate of. Now, let's see the other races. So California Proposition 50. This is essentially a ballot measure that is being presented to Californians that asks them, do they want to do a mid-decade congressional map redraw? Do they want to be able to redraw the districts in which people are going to be voting for their congressional representatives? Now, Californians traditionally have been vehemently anti-gerrymandering, right? They don't like gerrymandering. You tend to find that there's this statement that it's like, Republicans come to a knife fight with a gun. Democrats don't show up with anything, right? And I think that tends to be the case with more of these kind of like Cold War style political moves, where somebody might say, "Oh, okay, well, we have the power to do this, so we are going to do this thing, like redraw the congressional maps, whether or not the voters want to." That's what you're seeing in Texas, for example, right? The Texas legislature has the power to redraw the maps. They don't have to ask the voters. They can just go ahead and do it. In California, they don't have the same experience, and traditionally, voters in California, and really most blue states, have said, we don't want gerrymandering at all. We don't care if it favors us. We don't want gerrymandering. We want fair election maps. We want fair distribution of votes, and it should not be based on party. It should be based purely on population. Now, we can go to Polymarket and look at the exact same thing. Proposition 50 should be on here. California, let's look it up. Prop 50. There would have been a time, as you can see, earlier in the year, where Californians would have said, no, we're not interested. We do not want to do mid-decade map redraws. It is not legal to do this on a constitutional level. The Supreme Court has allowed it because the Supreme Court is kind of a kangaroo court at this point. But it's not. It doesn't make any sense. It's legal. Now, things have changed a lot in the last few months. What Donald Trump has done in the United States regarding the tariffs, regarding the kidnappings, regarding the destruction of the United States standing on the global stage, removing us from all of our climate contributions, destroying our trade relationships, and then further than that, trying to infiltrate states and essentially tell them what to do with their National Guard, with their in terms of federal judges in those states, right? Like allowing ICE agents to come into the courtrooms and all these kinds of things. California is an overwhelmingly Democratic state, and they do lean more progressive generally. The California General Assembly is pretty damn progressive. So when you get the population to start seeing these things that are going on, they'll change their minds very quickly, right? They'll go from, we don't want any where was it? Here we go. They'll go from we don't want this kind of unfair election redistricting to sure, let's go, give it to us, right? To the point where now this poll is suggesting that about 57% of eligible voters will go ahead. 56% of eligible voters will go ahead and say, we are down, redraw those maps, get the Republicans out, right? That's essentially what this map is going to do. It is going to take California from, I think, current congressional map. Current congressional map. Can't click anything. So here you go. Fuck, this is awful. Oh, dude, you gotta be kidding me. Some people just have no idea how to... maybe I'm that person. The bottom line is California has about 12 red districts. Pardon me, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 red districts. Whereas the proposed map would drop that down to like 5. Right? So they're looking to start to scrape up seats so they can do what they can to quote unquote defend democracy. That's their idea. Hey, what's up, Julian? How's it going? I'm just ranting and raving about current political maps, and I'm doing my guesses before I play this video for you guys of what's going to happen. So, Mamdani projected winner margin. I'm going to go, I don't know. California Prop 50 projected winner, yes. Predicted margin, I'm going 57% yes. Let's go Virginia list. I don't know shit about the lieutenant governor. Can't comment on that. Virginia Governor Abigail Spanberger is a run-of-the-mill, normal-ass Democrat. Kind of corporatist Democrat. She has CIA as her background. That's where she built her career. But she's sort of a run-of-the-mill capitalist Democrat, right? Not the best choice. In fact, it's incredible to me that the Democratic Party is still platforming people like this. But in the environment that we find ourselves in, right? Let me close my window. It's getting kind of cold. In the environment that we find ourselves in, right? Winsome Earl Sears is sort of doing the classic mistake that a lot of MAGA Republicans make. They think that Donald Trump is a playbook, right? They look at Donald Trump and they say, I need to be boisterous like this. I need to be rude. I need to be, I need to, bully people and call people names and focus on this kind of generalist drivel of fear, scare, tactic, etc., right? The problem is you're not Donald Trump, right? And every single person that tries to copy this playbook fails. You had Dan Cox, the governor candidate in my home state of Maryland, was an ex neo-Nazi, essentially, a Confederate. He's like part of some organization called the Sons of the Confederacy, and the Republicans were like, let's platform that guy to be the governor, right? Lost in an absolute avalanche. You have Carrie Lake, I believe, out of Arizona, who's another one of those people that tries to copy this Trump playbook. She's run for office like 4 different times, lost every single time. And Arizona is not a solid blue state, right? Arizona is a swing state. So Abigail Spanberger just kind of lets Winsome Earl Sears do her thing, talk insane crap about trans people, right? Virginia's economy is being smashed to bits because the vast majority of high income earners in Virginia are somewhere within the federal government ecosystem, right? They're not being paid. They're losing their livelihoods. Winsome Earl Sears is not talking about that at all. So I think Abigail Spanberger is going to win. I think the margin's going to be pretty healthy. Virginia continues to move further and further to the left. That's primarily because of high skill immigration, right? Lieutenant governor, have no idea, but I don't imagine people are going to go D and then go R. Not going to make any sense. Virginia Attorney General, there is some speculation because so Jason Mayaris has been the Republican Attorney General he's already served a term, as far as I'm aware. It might be 2 terms even. Now, Jay Jones is the Democrat, who would otherwise be the favorite. The problem is that Jay Jones recently had a scandal where he had a bunch of text messages go public where he essentially called for the death of Republicans. He called for using violence against Republicans. Some pretty harsh words. And so there's speculation that Jay Jones might not hold on. And Jason Mayaris may, in fact, get elected for another term. Finally, this race is pretty tight down here. New Jersey governor. There is some baggage with Mikey Sherrill. It's not really that significant in my opinion. She was part of some cheating scandal when she went to West Point, but she didn't even cheat. She just knew about the cheating and she didn't report it, so she got in trouble as a college kid. Come on, dog. She's in her 40s or 50s or something now, right? And so I think it's another one of those races. Mikey Sherrill, there's nothing special about her. I mean, she is not a particularly progressive candidate. She's pretty run-of-the-mill, pretty corporate. That being said, she's still got that D next to her name. And right now, the Republicans, both the Democrats and the Republicans, are sitting on some horrible, horrible polling. I mean, people just think that both of those brands are trash. But the fact of the matter is that the current president is a Republican, right? The House of Representatives is controlled by Republicans, Senate, Supreme Court, all controlled by Republicans, and the state of the country is absolute ass. And most people feel that shit, right? And so I don't imagine Jack Cianarelli, I can't remember how you pronounce his name. I don't imagine Jack Cianarelli really has much of a pathway. Again, there's nothing particularly different about him. He hasn't done much to either distance himself or familiarize himself with Donald Trump. I mean, buddy with Donald Trump. So all people see is that Jack Cianarelli's a Republican. He's got nothing to say to push back against Donald Trump. And right now, everybody is feeling like their states are under attack. And so, in the last election, in the presidential election, New Jersey was actually a lot closer than I think the Democrats would have won. And New Jersey is supposed to be one of those solid blue bastions, but it turns out that this race, or New Jersey in general, has just gotten a lot closer, and this race is almost a dead heat as it looks right now. Again, I think my prediction would simply be that because of the national environment, because neither of these candidates have done much to truly differentiate themselves, I think most voters are going to show up and vote against Donald Trump, and Jack Cianarelli just hasn't done anything to prove that he's against Donald Trump. So I'm going to go throw a predicted winner, Mikey Sherrill D. Margin, it's going to be tight, maybe 51%. Virginia Attorney General's race, I might go Jason Miyares just because I've listened to some of the... what are those called? Like their strategy sessions, or what are those called? It's like a focus group. That's the answer. A focus group where people voters sit down and they do interviews. And I have heard a lot of people say that they did not like what they saw in those J. Jones texts. And again, I think that most Americans just are not that politically awake, and they don't play out these strategies in their head over the long term of like what happens when you have an attorney general who skates by not commenting on Donald Trump, but then the second that he secured that election is willing to be a soldier for the president. They don't think about what that would mean for their state. So I'm going to go ahead and say Jason Miyares wins this one, predicted winner. I bet it'll be close. Let's go 51% for him. Maybe to a 49% Jay Jones. I think Hashimi's, I don't know shit about the lieutenant governor. I think they take it just by virtue of being the Democrat. And Abigail Spanberger takes it just by virtue of Winsome Earl Sears being an absolute psychopath. So we got Mamdani with the win, California Prop 50 with the win, Spanberger with the win, Hashimi with the win, Miyares with the win, Mikey Sherrill with the win. But you've heard me yap for long enough. Let's see what this guy who actually knows what he's talking about has to say.
Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Monday, November 3rd, 2025. Happy Election Eve. Today we are going to be taking a look at my 2025 election forecast. On your screen right now are a lot of races that we are going to be taking a look at today. The New York City mayoral race, California's Proposition 50, Virginia's governor race, lieutenant governor's race, attorney general's race, as well as the New Jersey governor's race here. It is election eve, and I'm super excited to actually release what we expect to see on election night in about 24 hours. I will be doing a live stream. If you're interested in watching, I'd encourage that you do so. We'll be going through the results through the evening as we start to see the results pour in. Probably will end around the time that California's Proposition 50 is wrapped up. Notoriously, though, the state is very slow at capturing vote count. We know that from the Secretary of State, who's been quite resistant to any type.
Yeah, so for those of you that are interested, I'll pretty much be here all day. I'll definitely be here a lot tonight, right? So if you guys want to plan to come back, I would say 8 p.m. Eastern Standard would be a really good time to pop back in. That's when results will really start to roll in. And so from probably 8 p.m. until about midnight, I'll be on. Maybe 8 p.m. to 1, something like that. So without further ado,
of substantive change in the Secretary of State's office, but really what I'm focusing on today is a lot less about, how we expect the results to come in hour after hour, but rather what we can expect to see as the results are confirmed in each of these individual races. So we are going to go in order, as you see on your screen right now. New York City's mayoral race is going to be the one that we talk about first. We're going to go to California's Proposition 50, jump over to Virginia afterwards, and then finish off few months. I think what has really piqued my interest about this city in particular is that Mamdani has practically maintained this dominating figure in the state and city since his victory in the June primary, where he upset everyone and defeated Andrew Cuomo in that first round and substantively rechanged the electorate that we're working with within this city. And we are starting to see it emerge again. I've been seeing a lot of headlines, and New York City is great in terms of reporting early voting data. Really gives us, on the election analysis side, time to digest some of this information that many states just simply will not release, in some cases until after the election is tabulated and as the results start pouring in. And in many cases, these Board of Elections are radio silent, not in the city of New York. And with it, it has provided substantial context in understanding, one, how many people are actually voting when it comes down to partisan breakdown. The Democratic Party obviously trouncing Republicans when it comes down to early voting, which we can already expect is going to benefit Mamdani in the city, but not to mention that just across, the city itself, it is Mamdani who does tremendously well. In all of the early voting data, he's breaking the records from 2021. And when you take a look at the amount of young voters that are turning out, you are seeing that Mamdani effect in full force, where every single age group is seeing an overestimation from what the 2021 numbers were, which means at face value, everybody's turning out more. But to the degree that you'll find it, right, relative to the 2021 numbers, you're seeing that young voters from ages 18 to 29 are in a substantially higher portion of the turnout, market here for the early vote, which could also translate to higher vote share in the general election on Election Day set to take place tomorrow, as we saw that it wasn't Election Day vote that turned around the primary for Andrew Cuomo, and in almost every single way, Mamdani's win was pretty much calculated before the votes had been fully cast. And we saw on Election Day, it only contributed to the lead that Mamdani had. Everybody said that it would really narrow up his margin, and evidently that was not the case. And so looking at what we can see too, I mean, all of the data suggests that Mamdani is going to do quite well. I think there has been this pipe dream from Republicans and those aligned with Andrew Cuomo being sold on this idea that Donald Trump's last-minute endorsement of Andrew Cuomo is going to benefit him in this race, that there's going to be such a big realignment within the Democratic Party and this complete rejection of Zohran Mamdani, when you just simply aren't seeing it across the city, especially a city that feels very inspired by Mamdani. Now, Eric Adams might be out of the race, and that's the one wild card here that, really changed the race in some ways in the final weeks. Didn't really do much, though. I mean, it changed it insofar that it reduced the number of candidates from 4 down to 3 and really made Curtis Sliwa the subject of this massive pressure campaign to get him out of the race. Obviously, he was never going to drop out of the race. He even went so far as to say that he'd rather be tortured, his words, not mine, than endorse Andrew Cuomo in the New York City mayoral race. So really, we knew that was never going to go anywhere, and evidently, the numbers are still in Mamdani's favor. I think from everything that I've seen, I think that the early voting data is clear. The trend lines are clear, even if the race is more narrow than I think some Democrats would have hoped for. The race ultimately will end up with one clear and decisive victor, and that is Mamdani in the city of New York. We're going to start off by saying that Mamdani wins the election here in this city of New York. I'm going to jump over and paste in this, background here, but Mamdani's going to do well. I mean, we're going to find that he's going to win this race. Let me go ahead and make the font size a little bit bigger here. That way it's more standardized across the board, but Mamdani's going to win. And I think that we're going to find that this margin here is actually going to be quite substantial. I think that what we have found is that, the Democrats are, one, going to be very interested to see exactly what this margin breakdown is going to be. My take here is that it is probably going to be Mamdani who ends up beating out Andrew Cuomo by probably around 15 points, right? I think what we're tracking here is that if the data is correct and our understanding of it is right, then Mamdani's probably going to clock in at around 51%. Cuomo's going to be at 36%, and Sliwa is going to fall in very far behind at roughly 13%. And I think you're going to see that that is what gives Mamdani the decisive victory here. That's not the margin. Let me copy and paste this over here, but the margin here is going to be D plus 15%, a pretty decisive victory, if you ask me, across the board, and one that I do think is going to usher in a mandate of sorts for Mamdani in this race. And so as we move on, I just want us to make a note that New York City is probably going to have a lot of this data very early on. We're probably going to see a lot of it dumped all at once, and probably around, this time next evening at a few hours, we'll probably get our final results across the race. But I think Cuomo's going to come in second, Sliwa's going to come in at a distant third, and even that combined coalition, I'm not adamant is enough to take down Mamdani, who I do think clears that 50% mark as you get through the voting tabulations in the state. The next race we're going to take a look at is the state of California. Proposition 50. Now, this is a proposition that a lot of voters on the left have felt very excited about in the final weeks leading up to the actual election day, as the early voting data has shown Republicans getting trounced across the state, especially as California Republicans announced quite literally less than a week ago that they were giving up efforts to try to combat the Democratic Party's pushback against Texas's redraw in the state of California. Proposition 50 was already in a good position given that Kamala Harris won the state by roughly 20 points. It's a safe Democratic state and has been for decades on end, and to see the fact that Republicans initially said they were going to spend $100 million in the race, they were going to get all of these high-profile Republicans out there to drive up turnout in opposition, and they were going to get Democrats on their side. Not only did that not happen, but even their Republicans didn't turn out. They couldn't raise $100 million. They raised $7 million instead of $100. Kevin McCarthy had to lead the effort there with Arnold Schwarzenegger, who had not been in office, since the 2010s. And then you found that Kevin McCarthy, who left office on his own accord, but probably would have been subject to the redraw here, even himself in Prop 50, as the map is set to find a new leader for many of these Republican districts. The point is, that Proposition 50 has probably been one of the best cases for Democrats, as we've seen in terms of not only just congressional redistricting, but also just ballot efforts. This is one that I do think, given that 15 years ago, it was Democrats who passed the proposition that implemented the Independent Redistricting Commission in the state that now is being sought to be overturned by the same voting populace that ushered it in less than 2 decades ago, under Obama's first term. And so to see that happen in real time, it is a change not just in the way that Gavin Newsom and Democrats at the top are interacting with present-day politics and pushing back against Donald Trump's second administration. It is entirely the voters, too, who feel, in many cases, I think, a moral obligation to put aside their feelings around gerrymandering and Democratic governance in the state and ushering in a new congressional map that benefits the Democratic Party on the national stage. And what I think we are going to see is that in the state of California, it is going to pass probably by a very substantial amount. Do I think it passes by more than Kamala Harris? Probably not. But the yes vote is going to be that secured winner, where you're going to find that, it is that state that gives the Democrats the upper hand. I don't really like this font. I'm going to go ahead and change it over to whatever it is. But here it is. Yes is going to pass the predicted winner mark. I do believe that you're going to find that it is, again, going to be largely in line with what we saw for Kamala Harris. I think you're going to get right under there. I think it's going to pass, yes, by 17 percentage points. I think it thinks that I'm trying to do a little bit of math here. Unfortunately, Google Sheets, that is in fact not the case. But I think the breakdown is going to be pretty clear-cut. You're going to find that it's going to pass across the state here, probably by a pretty substantial amount. I think you're going to get to around half margins. But what I've always found to be quite interesting about California, too, is that what we have seen in terms of Democratic resistance to Donald Trump, I think you have found it to be some of the most engaged most engaged and enraged, arguably, too, electorates that we've seen across the country who, Republicans try and say that they're going to push back, whatever it is, across the state. I think we have seen, finally, not only just from the Dem Gov, not just from the Dem legislature, not just from the Dem Attorney General who are, suing Trump, pushing back against him and changing the maps here, but I do think that this is going to be, base camp for understanding Democrats who have gone from being more passive, more, not as oppositional to the GOP as Democrats would have liked them to be. In California, I do think you've seen a very substantive change that explains why Newsom's approval rating is higher, why 75% of those voting yes report to the media that they are voting yes, not to benefit Democrats, not to change the maps just to help their political party, but to push back against Trump and give Republicans a taste of their own medicine. I think that's where we're at across the state. And I think that does a service, I think, at least to some degree, to the Democratic Party on the broad scale about finding an example or a great state that is willing to push back against what the Democrats are seeing on the national stage, what Republicans are trying to do across the board here. And I think that you're going to find that the state of California is going to be a great example of a state that pushes back against the president. So, I'd say, we're going to get to a point where yes is going to pass. It's going to be a pretty substantial margin. It's one that I think is going to come up short of beating Kamala Harris. I do think there are some Democratic holdouts. You even see it in the state legislature. Some of those progressive Democrats are the ones not leading the charge. Very obviously not. They're not going to be as outspoken against the Republicans. But you are going to find that maybe it is some of those Democrats who say, you know what? I'm not fully on board. I'm going to stick to my guns here. I'm going to say that it's wrong to do a gerrymander across the state. But I do think that a lot of Democrats are equally in recognition that, it's not the fairest thing to do, but simultaneously, Republicans are being unfair everywhere else. And so there are going to be some progressive holdouts. I don't think it's going to be that substantial, though. You're going to see this pass probably around 59% to 41% across the state. But I think that's what you're going to see is that yes is going to, trounce no in this state. But to the degree that it passes Kamala Harris, not fully convinced, but I think you're going to get right up there. And I think that's a major win for the Democratic Party, given that some of the early data might have suggested that it might have failed across the state of California. So that's it. 2 states, New York City, practically a state right larger than 38 states in the country, but 8.3 million people. California's Proposition 50, yes, is going to pass there. Let's take a look at the biggest state, I think. Unfortunately, we're not doing the House of Delegates race. If you're interested in looking at a forecast that I trust and think is quite substantial, you can actually take a look at State Navigate. They do a great breakdown of their expectations in the Virginia House of Delegates. I'll link it in the bio down below or in the description box down below, but we're not going to focus that on today's video. I didn't have enough time to actually go through on a seat-by-seat basis and break it down, but I did have time to take a look at the Virginia governor's race, lieutenant governor's race, and attorney general's race as we go into the final stages the day before the election. Now, Jay Jones is the attorney general candidate who you might have heard his name all around the Beltway media and the mainstream media as you see that his text messages were leaked by a Republican in the state House of Delegates, where he served and is currently serving as a Democrat from a district there, where text messages leaked that were very scandalous. Everybody universally rejected it, and it was something that many people felt might be damning enough that Abigail Spanberger, who we will discuss in just a moment, is expected to do tremendously well in the state of Virginia, that result might not go as well for the Democrats as they would have hoped. We'll talk about it, but that's the one that I think we're going to spend the most time on, just simply because we know how Virginia's governor's race is going to go. We've known it for quite some time. We're probably going to see Abigail Spanberger do very well in that state. And so I do think it's a bit difficult to some degree to do the attorney general's race, knowing that it's going to be so vastly different than the other 2 races in this state. But let's go ahead and get started with the Virginia governor's race. As I said, Abigail Spanberger is going to win the governor's race by a very substantial amount. I mean, I think that she's going to be up across this state probably by about 11 points, which I think is noteworthy, not just because Kamala Harris won Virginia by a margin here of roughly 6 points, but because Biden, as the best performing Democrat in Virginia, I think going back all the way to Lyndon B. Johnson, I'll have to take a look at the last time, Virginia was a double-digit state. We'd have to go back to, 1964. Even then, Lyndon B. Johnson won it by 7. And so, Joe Biden was the best performing Democrat in Virginia in decades on end, over half a century. And I think, I do adamantly believe that it is going to be Abigail Spanberger who exceeds that margin and wins very well across the state. Early voting is up with Democratic leaning turnout. Every single poll we've seen in the recent, timeline in the Virginia governor's race has been quite good. The announcement that they're going to be moving forward with a redraw across the state also stands to reason that Democrats feel very comfortable. Oftentimes, they would not engage in anything this last minute unless they felt they had a substantive enough majority and a large enough voting bank that they could feel comfortable calling this very early on, even though it might enrage some swing voters. Clearly, if the margin is too large, there's no reason. If Virginia is a reliable enough Democratic state, you don't have to worry about that. Strong support for independence. You're seeing that, Abigail Spanberger has done very, very well across the state, has been leading consistently by double digits here in the state of Virginia. I really think she's in a great position. That is a race I have felt comfortable calling for quite some time. I think you're going to find that the margin here is going to be roughly about 55% for the Democrats to 44% for the Republicans here, for Winsome Sears in the state of Virginia, who's right now the lieutenant governor, will be nothing in months' time. So, Virginia governor's race call. Democrats are going to win that one. California's Proposition 50 going to pass probably by a similar margin to that of Kamala Harris in the last cycle. Mamdani's going to win in the city of New York. We're finding the Democrats are on a strong pathway here. But what's happening in the lieutenant governor's race and attorney general's race? Well, I said earlier that I felt that the lieutenant governor's race was going to be one that's disaligned from the attorney general's race, but also in a way, I think, a little bit more disaligned than the governor's race. I think for a while, we've known that these races roughly run together. But all three races have found themselves with vastly different margins depending on the data points that you use. When you look at the Virginia governor's race, this one has been pretty much set in stone. But as it stands for the lieutenant governor's race, that race has found itself polling about 5 to 6 points closer on consistent average in comparison to the governor's race. Now, I don't know if that is attributed just simply to lower name ID. I think that's a huge factor, right? Winsome Sears, who has been proven to be one of the most least electable Republicans in the state of Virginia, was carried across the finish line by her governor candidate Glenn Youngkin in 2021, not because she was strong and that voters liked her, but because they liked the guy at the top of the ticket and wanted to align one political party across the state, and that is what drove Winsome Sears across the finish line. And so as much as I do believe the lieutenant governor's race is absolutely more competitive, I simultaneously think that what we've seen in terms of turnout, the base and constituency here in the state of Virginia, I'm not all that convinced John Reed, who has also had his fair share of scandals, gets that much closer to the lieutenant governorship in the state. So what I do think we're going to see is that Democrats are going to win this one. I think Ghazala Hashmi is going to win this race by a margin here of roughly 8 points. I think you're going to see it a little bit closer. I can imagine it, just as, the lieutenant governor's race was closer in 2017 and 2021. But my final estimation here is that Democrats are going to turn out. They're angry, they're enthusiastic, they want to get to the ballot box and elect Democrats, especially in a state like Virginia that's been directly impacted by federal funding freezes, the government shutdown, Doge layoffs. I mean, everywhere you look, it's going to be very hard to find a voter that doesn't know someone, at least personally, who's been affected by the actions of the Trump administration. And given John Reed has not distanced himself enough from that administration, I don't think it's going to be that easy for, these candidates in specific, John Reed and Winsome Sears, to get that much closer to winning their elections, even if Virginia at, core might not be as solid of a Democratic state as it once was in 2020. It's certainly walking its way back, given the disaffection with the president of the United States. And so that leaves me to the Virginia Attorney General's race, and then we'll get into New Jersey in just a moment here. The Attorney General's race is the most interesting. I think by metric point and by data point is fascinating, to say the least. But Jay Jones has been welcomed back into the Democratic ticket. He spoke at the rally with President Barack Obama just 2 days ago. I mean, Jay Jones, who was largely pushed away, and Abigail Spanberger said on stage that voters can vote their conscience and make a decision as to who they want to back, and now he's back campaigning with the Democratic ticket. I think for a while, Democrats felt that this race was a done deal, that they were no longer going to be able to win their race because of where they stood and how much voters had changed their minds, seemingly, overnight. But what has stood out to me as something that I think has been quite interesting in the state of Virginia is that in this Attorney General's race, the polling is telling a very different story depending on those who have voted already and those who intend to vote. The average here says Jason Miyares is going to win this race. But one thing is clear. He cannot cross that hurdle of 48%. VoteHub, Real Clear Politics, Decision Desk HQ all have him at 47.5. I don't believe that days before an election, where both parties have been spending millions of dollars advertising their candidates, that 8, 9, 10% of the electorate is undecided.
What's going on, all the new people that just joined? I am doing some election predicting today, as it is November 4th, Election Day 2025. So I know I don't typically talk about this kind of thing on my channel, but I am a deeply passionate political strategist, and so it's interesting stuff. And so whether it's interesting to you or not, feel free to stick around. But I'm going to be here pretty much all day. I'm going to bounce pretty soon, in just a couple minutes, to go run some errands and do some things. But I will be back very soon, early afternoon EST, and I'll probably be streaming up until 1 o'clock in the morning. So hopefully you guys are having a good day. Just wanted to give you some feedback on what's going on here.
I don't believe that there's that many voters out there who have not made a decision. What I do believe, and I think you'll find this in the early voting data, is that of those who have already voted, very little party splitting from those who have voted for governor for Democrats, lieutenant governor for Democrats, and attorney general for Democrats. And granted, those who are the most engaged and partisan often do vote early. But at the end of the day, I think there's a factor here. We talk a lot about the quiet Trump vote, and I think that's very much a proven phenomenon election after election, maybe not in 2024, given that the polls said that Kamala Harris would only win 2 out of the 7 swing states, and she won none of them. But looking at the Virginia Attorney General's race, the data is saying Republicans are going to win it. But I'm hesitant. I think that there is certainly a reality in which Jay Jones wins the Attorney General's race, not because voters condone his behavior, but because they would rather have a Democrat where they can disagree and condemn said behavior than a Republican they think might be aligned against the interests of their constituents. I mean, it is obviously going to be a very difficult decision, I think, to even make a call on this race, given how competitive we think it's going to be. I do think it's going to come down to the wire and will probably be even closer than the New Jersey governor's race. But if it is true, in fact, that Spanberger is going to win by roughly 11 points, it is really hard for me to see that 1 out of 5 voters for Abigail Spanberger are going to change their minds on the Attorney General's race, given that roughly 0 to 5% actually have of those who have already voted thus far. Many of them who openly knew about this scandal. And so I think where we're at is that this race here is going to be probably the most competitive. If I was to call this race a week ago, I think that, I would have been of the opinion that Jason Miyares probably was going to eke by and narrowly win in this race. I don't know if I agree today. I think Jay Jones is going to barely win. I even prepped this, before to actually have a Republican victory in the Virginia race, because I did think that the Attorney General's race was one that the trends weren't great for the Democratic Party. But much of it seems to have been mitigated as of late. The data was a lot better for the GOP than it is now, and very high-quality pollsters, Republican internals, Emerson College, too, which has been remarkably accurate in the 2025 cycle, are telling us that Jay Jones is going to win. And I do think that as it stands today, I do believe there are enough quiet Jay Jones voters that by the time you reach the ballot box and count all the votes in the state of Virginia, he could very well win across this state by a very narrow amount. I mean, you're talking...
For the few of you that are actually watching this, let's skip ahead. What does this guy throw? Okay, so he
across
throw
the
Mikey
state.
Sherrill. Let's see how much. I'm gonna bet it's like a 0.5 to 1. You kidding me? You giving her 7 points? Wow. I wonder, maybe we should have listened to him justify that. But anyway, so yeah, just doing a little politics stream today, you guys. Election days today. If you have a election in your state, go vote. I am going to throw this on. Oops. I'm going to throw this on pause for now. I'm going to run some errands. I'm going to make some food. But I'm going to be live most of today talking about this stuff. So if this is interesting to you, if you're not a subscriber, hit that subscribe button. I will be back in a few hours. But I appreciate all of you watching. Take it easy.